My name is Hayley, 34 years old, and I built a $4 million tech company from nothing. Last month, I sat in my mother's living room watching her hand over my entire life's work to my sister Emma, who sat there with her 3 kids looking triumphant. Mum's words still echo in my mind. She has kids to provide for Hayley. You need to understand. Everyone expected me to scream, to cry, to fight. Instead, I smiled. That smile confused everyone in the room, especially Emma. Before I reveal why I smiled that day and how I turned their betrayal into my greatest victory, let me know where you're watching from. Please subscribe if you want to hear how a daughter's preparation saved her from her own family's greed. The story really begins in 2015 when I was 25 years old, fresh out of college with a computer science degree and more ambition than sense. I was working 3 jobs in Seattle delivering food for DoorDash until 2 in the morning, coding freelance websites until sunrise, and pulling shifts at a coffee shop downtown. My studio apartment was so small I could touch both walls if I stretched my arms out, and I lived on instant ramen and whatever leftover pastries I could take home from the coffee shop. The idea for my company came to me during a particularly brutal shift when I watched the manager spend 4 hours trying to reconcile inventory spreadsheets. I thought there had to be a better way, something that could automate this process using artificial intelligence. That night, I started coding what would become the foundation of my AI-powered inventory management software for small businesses. For the first 6 months, I coded 18 hours a day. My social life disappeared completely. Friends stopped inviting me to things because I always said no. My parents, especially my mother, thought I was wasting my life. "Get a real job at Microsoft like your cousin Bradley," she would say every Sunday during our mandatory family dinners. "He makes 6 figures and has excellent benefits. What are you doing with your life?" My mother had always favored my older sister Emma, who had taken what Mum considered the proper path in life. Emma married Marcus Wellington at 23, a man from old money whose trust fund could buy my entire apartment building. While I was surviving on ramen and coding until my eyes burned, Emma was posting photos from their honeymoon in Bora Bora. While I was maxing out credit cards to buy server space, she was having a lavish baby shower at the Four Seasons with 200 guests. My first client was a local bakery that paid $50 a month for my software. $50. I celebrated like I had won the lottery. The owner, Mrs. Chen No Wait, Mrs. Thompson, became my biggest advocate. She told every business owner she knew about my software. Slowly, painfully, I built my client base one small business at a time. The breakthrough came after a year of grinding. A chain of 15 sporting goods stores signed up for an annual contract worth $40,000. I remember calling my dad from my car, crying with relief. He was proud of me. I could hear it in his voice. But when I told Mum, she just said that Emma was pregnant with her second child, and wasn't that wonderful news. I nearly went bankrupt twice that first year. I maxed out 5 credit cards and had to borrow rent money from my college roommate. There were nights I went to bed hungry because I had to choose between food and keeping my servers running. Meanwhile, Emma was renovating her kitchen for the second time because the marble countertops weren't exactly the right shade of white. Jake was my first hire, a brilliant developer I found on Craigslist, who believed in the vision enough to work for equity instead of salary. We worked out of my garage, which I had converted into an office. The neighbors complained about our cars being parked on the street at all hours, but we kept pushing forward. The turning point came when I spent 3 months cold emailing every tech journalist I could find on Twitter. Finally, a reporter from TechCrunch responded to my 100th email. The article she wrote about our David versus Goliath story against established inventory management companies changed everything. Within a week, we had 300 new sign-ups, and venture capitalists started calling. By 2017, the divide between Emma and me had become a canyon that seemed impossible to bridge. Emma lived in a 4-bedroom colonial house in Bellevue, with a kitchen that belonged in a magazine, and a nursery that looked like Pinterest had exploded in it. Every family dinner became a masterclass in comparison with Mum as the instructor and me as the failing student. That Thanksgiving stands out in my memory like a scar. I had just closed our first $1 million in annual recurring revenue. It had taken 2 years of grinding, of sacrifice, of pushing through every obstacle imaginable. I walked into my parents' house floating on air, ready to share this incredible milestone with my family. When I announced it at dinner, Mum literally turned away from me mid-sentence to coo over Emma's announcement that she was pregnant with her 3rd child. Another blessing, Mum gushed, while my achievement hung in the air like smoke from a blown-out candle. What nobody knew was that Dad had secretly invested his entire retirement savings into my company. He believed in me when no one else did, transferring the money in small chunks so Mum wouldn't notice. He would slip into my garage office late at night with sandwiches and coffee, sitting quietly, while Jake and I coded, just being present in his supportive way. Emma's husband Marcus was perhaps the worst part of family gatherings. He came from the kind of money that made him believe everyone else was beneath him. "When are you going to give up this little hobby and settle down?" he would ask, swirling his wine glass like he was auditioning for a wealthy villain role. "No man wants a woman who's married to her work. You're not getting any younger, Hayley." Mum's manipulation tactics became more sophisticated as my company grew. She started leaving articles about egg freezing on my desk. She would invite eligible sons of her friends to dinner without telling me, ambushing me with awkward setups. She bought me self-help books with titles like Finding Love After 30 and Why Smart Women Fail at Romance for Christmas, while Emma received family heirloom jewelry that had been passed down for generations. The workspace situation became unbearable when Emma started dropping her kids at my garage office during crucial client meetings. She would show up unannounced, claiming emergencies that always turned out to be hair appointments or lunch dates with her mommy group friends. I would have to conduct million-dollar negotiations while her toddler screamed in the background and her baby needed diaper changes. At our cousin Laura's wedding, the introduction incident happened. Mum stood up during the reception to introduce her daughters to the extended family. She presented Emma as my successful daughter, a devoted mother of 3 beautiful children, living the American dream. Then she turned to me and said, "And this is Hayley. She's still figuring things out." The room laughed politely while I died inside my million-dollar company, reduced to nothing in her eyes. I started building our second product line during this time, an advanced predictive analytics add-on that could forecast inventory needs 3 months in advance. While Emma was posting about wine playdates and comparing diaper brands in her mum groups, I was negotiating with suppliers in China at 3 a.m. and flying to conferences where I was often the only woman in the room. The lonely victories accumulated like snow in a blizzard. I would close major deals and celebrate alone in my apartment with takeout Chinese food and my laptop. When I got featured in the local business journal, I framed the article and hung it in my office. Mum never asked to see it. Her friend group would ask what Hayley does at gatherings, and Mum would wave her hand dismissively and change the subject to Emma's children's latest achievements. The emotional toll was crushing me slowly. I developed chronic insomnia and started having panic attacks. But I pushed through because I knew that someday, somehow, I would prove that my path had value too. I just never imagined the price I would have to pay for that validation. 2019 became the year everything changed, though not in the way anyone expected. After 14 months of negotiations, conference calls at ungodly hours, and flying back and forth to New York 12 times, I finally landed a Fortune 500 client. The contract was worth $2 million over 3 years, and it validated everything I had built. My team had grown to 25 employees, and we moved into a real office space in downtown Seattle, a gorgeous loft with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Sound. Emma visited the office exactly once. She walked around with her nose slightly wrinkled as if the space offended her suburban sensibilities. "It's so sterile," she commented, running her finger along a desk. "Where are the personal touches? The family photos? You can't build a life in a place like this, Hayley." Her kids ran wild through the space, knocking over coffee cups and disturbing my employees who were trying to work. When Forbes included me in their 30 under 30 list for enterprise technology, I thought finally, Mum would see what I had accomplished. I called her immediately, my voice shaking with excitement. Her response: "That's nice, dear, but you know what would really make me happy? Grandchildren from you. Emma's already on her 3rd. Your biological clock is ticking louder every day." A competitor approached me with an acquisition offer of $2 million. $2 million for 4 years of my life, my blood, sweat, and endless tears. I turned it down because I knew we were on the verge of something much bigger. Mum found out through Dad and called me selfish for not taking the money and using it to start a proper life, which in her vocabulary meant finding a husband and producing grandchildren. The pneumonia incident showed me exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. I had been pushing myself too hard, working 20-hour days to launch our new enterprise platform. My immune system finally collapsed, and I ended up in the hospital for 3 days with severe pneumonia. It was also Emma's son's 4th birthday party, a carnival-themed extravaganza that probably cost more than my monthly payroll. From my hospital bed hooked up to IV antibiotics and struggling to breathe, I received text after text from Mum about how disappointed Emma was that I couldn't make it to the party. She never once asked how I was feeling. The innovation that changed everything came during my recovery. Lying in that hospital bed, I had time to think about a problem that had been nagging at me for months. I sketched out an algorithm on a napkin that would revolutionize how our AI processed data. When I got out, Jake and I spent 3 weeks refining it. We filed for a patent that would eventually become the cornerstone of our competitive advantage. Competitors started circling like sharks trying to poach my employees and reverse engineer our technology. Sarah joined the team during this period as our VP of Operations. She was brilliant, kind, and understood the vision immediately. More than that, she became the sister I never really had. We would work late into the night, ordering Thai food and solving problems together. She celebrated my wins with genuine joy and supported me through the challenges without judgment. When my family forgot my 30th birthday because it conflicted with Emma's son's soccer tournament, Sarah organised a surprise party with the entire team. Emma's social media presence during this time was a masterpiece of passive aggression. She would post quotes about how family is everything and success means nothing without loved ones to share it with, always tagging everyone except me. In her mum groups, she became known for her speeches about the dangers of women prioritising career over family, using unnamed cautionary tales that everyone knew were about me. Dad's minor heart attack happened on a Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of a board meeting when I got the call. I drove to the hospital, breaking every speed limit, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I arrived, Mum's first words weren't about Dad's condition, but an accusation. "This is because of all the stress you cause this family," she said. "Your father worries about you constantly, about your unnatural lifestyle." Emma added that Dad wouldn't have to worry if I just lived a normal life like everyone else. While sitting in that hospital waiting room, I overheard Mum talking to her church friend on the phone. She said, "Emma's the successful one, you know. 3 beautiful children, a loving husband, a proper home. Haley just has her computers. What kind of legacy is that?" Those words cut deeper than any knife could have. My $4 million company, my employees' livelihoods, my innovations that helped thousands of businesses, all of it reduced to just computers. I made a decision that night to never again let my family's opinion determine my worth. But I also decided to protect what I had built. The next morning, I called Benjamin, the best corporate lawyer in Seattle. The 3 weeks leading up to the betrayal were filled with red flags that in hindsight seemed as obvious as a fire alarm in a library. Mum suddenly developed an intense interest in my business, asking questions she had never cared about before. How exactly is the company structured? Who owns what percentage? Where do you keep your important documents? At first, I thought maybe she was finally taking an interest in my achievements. How naive I was. Emma's presence at family gatherings increased dramatically. She was suddenly sweet, bringing me my favourite coffee drinks and asking about my work with what seemed like genuine curiosity. She would sit next to me at dinner, touching my arm and calling me sis in a way she hadn't since we were children. Marcus started making comments about family businesses and how important it was to keep wealth within the bloodline. Their performance was Oscar-worthy. Dad's behaviour was the most troubling. He had always been my quiet supporter, but now he could barely look me in the eye. His hands would shake when he passed me the salt. He started drinking more wine at dinner and excusing himself from the table frequently. Once I caught him in the hallway and he started to say something, then stopped himself and walked away. I should have known something terrible was coming. The invitation came via a formal email from Mom's personal account, not even a phone call. Important family meeting regarding estate planning. Please attend. Sunday 2 p.m. Bring any relevant business documents. The formality of it made my skin crawl, but I attended because despite everything, they were still my family. Walking into my parents' living room that Sunday was like walking into an ambush. Mum sat in Dad's chair, a power position she never took unless she meant business. Emma and Marcus flanked her on the couch like lieutenants. A man in an expensive suit sat at the dining table with documents spread before him, a lawyer whose predatory smile reminded me of a shark sensing blood. Dad stood in the corner, staring out the window, his shoulders bent like he was carrying an invisible weight. Mum's speech had been rehearsed. I could tell by the way she delivered it like she was reading from a teleprompter in her mind. "Haley," she began, "we need to discuss the family's financial future. Your company, while impressive, lacks proper family oversight. Emma has 3 children to provide for, to educate, to launch into the world. You have only yourself to worry about. It's time to think about what's fair, what's right for the family legacy." The manipulation was masterful in its cruelty. She spoke about grandchildren I didn't have, about Emma's sacrifices as a mother. about how the family wealth should support those who are building the next generation. Every entrepreneur needs to know when to step aside for the greater good, she said, sliding a stack of papers across the coffee table toward me. The documents were transfer papers, already partially filled out, requiring only my signature to hand over my entire company to Emma. The lawyer explained in his smooth voice that this was a simple family reorganization for tax purposes, that I would still have a role, of course, but Emma would be the official owner and CEO. After all, he added with that shark smile, she has more at stake with 3 young children depending on her. Emma's practiced concern was almost convincing. Hayley. This is really for the best, she said, reaching for my hand. You can finally focus on finding someone starting your own family. You won't have the stress of running a company anymore. Think of how free you'll be. Marcus nodded along, adding that he would be happy to help manage the transition with his business experience, though his last 3 ventures had failed spectacularly, burning through his trust fund. That's when Dad finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Your mother and I have discussed this extensively. His words were carefully chosen, and I heard what he didn't say. Later, I would learn that Mum had threatened to divorce him and take everything if he didn't support this ambush. 40 years of marriage held hostage for my company. The forged signatures on the preliminary transfer documents were a nice touch. They had already filed some paperwork with the state using documents I had supposedly signed. The lawyer explained that contesting them would be lengthy and expensive, that it would be easier for everyone if I just signed the real transfer papers now and made everything official. Besides, Mum added, do you really want to tear this family apart over money? Is that the kind of person you've become? The emotional manipulation reached its crescendo when they brought out photo albums showing pictures of Emma's children, talking about their futures, their college funds, their needs. Mum spoke about how she might not have many years left and wanted to see the family wealth secured for the next generation. Don't be selfish, Hayley. Your sister has given me 3 grandchildren. What have you given this family besides stress and worry? Emma's mask slipped for just a moment when she mentioned that she had already told some people about taking over the company. Nothing official, of course, she said quickly, but her friends in her entrepreneurship group for mums were so excited for her new venture. The prenatal vitamins empire she had tried to start had failed miserably, leaving her $300,000 in debt that Marcus's family refused to cover. The ultimatum was delivered with surgical precision. Sign the papers now or be cut off from the family completely. No more holidays, no more Sunday dinners, no contact with the nieces and nephews. Mum made it clear that she would tell everyone I had chosen money over family, that I had become too greedy to help my own sister provide for her children. The family reputation would be protected, but mine would be destroyed. I asked for time to think, and the room erupted in protests. What was there to think about? Family came first, didn't it? But I held firm, my voice steady, despite the hurricane in my chest. Give me the weekend, I said. If you want me to sign over my life's work, at least give me 48 hours to process this. Emma's gloating was barely contained as I left. She walked me to my car, talking about her plans for the company, how she would make it more family-friendly, more balanced. You've done a good job building it, she said condescendingly, but it needs a mother's touch to really thrive. I drove away, watching her in my rearview mirror, already on her phone, probably spreading the news to her circle. That smile I gave them before leaving, it wasn't defeat. It was the smile of someone who had learnt to play chess while they were still learning checkers. 6 months before that family ambush, I had met Benjamin Crawford for coffee at a quiet cafe in Belltown. Benjamin wasn't just any lawyer. He was the kind of attorney that tech CEOs called when everything was on the line. I had hired him after a competitor tried to steal our proprietary code through a former employee. But that morning, I wasn't there about external threats. I need to protect my company from my family, I had told him, and his expression didn't change. In his 30 years of practice, he had seen every possible betrayal. He listened as I explained my concerns, my mother's increasing questions, Emma's sudden interest in my business, the subtle signs that something was being planned. Some might have called me paranoid. Benjamin called me smart. The holding company structure he designed was elegant in its simplicity and bulletproof in its execution. Cloud Peak Innovations. My original company would transfer all its intellectual property contracts and assets to a new entity called Phoenix Digital Solutions, which I owned entirely through a trust. Cloud Peak would retain a licensing agreement to use the technology, but that agreement had very specific terms. The beauty was that this was all standard corporate restructuring, the kind of thing tech companies did all the time, for tax and liability purposes. We filed everything properly publicly, but in such a boring technical way that no one who wasn't looking for it would notice. The contracts with clients were amended to include a key man clause that tied them to me personally. If I left Cloud Peak for any reason, the contracts could be transferred to any entity I chose. The patent for our revolutionary algorithm filed under Phoenix Digital Solutions from the start. When Emma discovered the truth, it was glorious in its anticlimax. She had marched into the Cloud Peak offices on Monday morning with Marcus and a locksmith, ready to take over her empire. The office manager, confused, had called me. I told her to give Emma full access to everything, every computer, every file, every password. Emma spent 6 hours going through everything, her confusion growing with each passing minute. The bank accounts had exactly $10,000, the minimum needed to keep them active. The client list was there, but when she called them, every single one said their contracts were with Haley personally, not with Cloud Peak. The proprietary software that ran our entire operation required a license key that renewed monthly, and that license was held by Phoenix Digital Solutions. Without it, the software was just useless code. Emma's screaming voicemail that evening was incoherent with rage. "You can't do this. Mom gave me the company. It's mine. I have the papers." She threatened lawyers, lawsuits, criminal charges. I saved every voicemail, every text, every email. Benjamin had taught me well about documentation. Mum's reaction was more controlled but equally venomous. She showed up at my real office, the Phoenix Digital Solutions headquarters, that she didn't even know existed. "How dare you betray your family like this? You're a snake, a terrible daughter. I've given you everything, and this is how you repay me." The security footage of her being escorted out by building security after she refused to leave would prove useful later. The counter evidence I had gathered was comprehensive. Every family dinner where they discussed their plan thinking I was in the bathroom was recorded on my phone. Every text between Emma and Marcus planning the takeover was screenshot and saved. The preliminary documents with the forged signatures, I had video evidence of myself at a conference in Portland on the day I supposedly signed them. When Marcus threatened a lawsuit, Benjamin met with their lawyer and laid out our case. Not only was the transfer fraudulent, but we had grounds for attempted theft, conspiracy, and extortion. The lawyer, who had clearly been told a very different story, advised them to drop everything immediately. Marcus's face when he realized he had been outsmarted by the little sister he had dismissed for years was a memory I would treasure forever. The employee loyalty was never in question. Sarah had known about the restructuring from the beginning, helping me implement it without arousing suspicion. When the rest of the team learned what had happened, they were furious on my behalf. Not one person even considered staying with Cloud Peak under Emma's leadership. They all signed new contracts with Phoenix Digital Solutions that same week. The meeting with Emma, where I explained everything, was held at a neutral location, a conference room at Benjamin's law firm. She came in guns blazing with Marcus and their own lawyer ready for war. When Benjamin laid out the complete picture showing them how Cloud Peak was just an empty shell, Emma's lawyer actually laughed. "It's brilliant," he admitted, looking at me with newfound respect. "Completely legal and absolutely devastating." Emma broke down crying, not tears of remorse, but of frustration. "You knew we were going to do this. You planned for it. How could you do this to me? I have 3 kids. I need this." The entitlement was breathtaking. She had tried to steal my life's work and was angry that I had protected myself. Mum tried every manipulation tactic in her arsenal. "We're family. Family forgives. Family helps each other. What would your grandmother think?" She invoked dead relatives, threatened to disown me, promised to make things right if I would just transfer everything to Emma as planned. The irony seemed lost on her that she was asking me to forgive an attempted theft while still demanding I complete the crime for them. Social media became Emma's battlefield of choice. She posted vague statements about family betrayal and sisterly jealousy, trying to control the narrative. But when mutual acquaintances asked for details, she couldn't explain why she thought she deserved my company without sounding like exactly what she was, a thief who got caught. The extended family took sides quickly once the truth spread. Aunt Patricia, Mum's sister, who had built her own successful real estate business, sent me a message that simply said, "About damn time, someone stood up to your mother's favoritism. Good for you, kiddo." Cousins I hadn't heard from in years reached out with their own stories of Emma's entitled behaviour and Mum's enabling. The best part was watching Emma try to explain to her mummy entrepreneur group why she wasn't actually taking over a $4 million company. The elaborate stories she had told them about her business acumen and her plans for expansion all crumbled. Several women in the group who were actual entrepreneurs reached out to me privately to express their disgust at what she had tried to do. Monday morning after the confrontation, I walked into the Phoenix Digital Solutions office to applause from my team. Sarah had told them the basics, and they had decorated the office with Phoenix-themed everything from balloons to a cake, shaped like a bird rising from flames. It was the first time I had felt truly celebrated for protecting something I had built. Emma showed up that afternoon alone this time, looking haggard. The bravado was gone, replaced by desperation. She needed $15,000 for the kids' private school tuition that was due that week. Marcus's family had cut him off after learning about the failed takeover, seeing it as another in his long line of failures. Could I at least help with that? For the kids, it's not their fault. I looked at her for a long moment, remembering every slight, every dismissive comment, every time she had made me feel less than. Your husband's trust fund might be cut off, but he still owns a portfolio worth several million. Liquidate some stocks. Sell the boat he never uses. Or Emma, here's a thought, get a job. The look of shock on her face when I suggested she actually work for money was almost comical. Mum's reconciliation attempts were relentless and increasingly desperate. She sent flowers to my office daily until I had them returned to sender. She texted me Bible verses about forgiveness. She showed up at my apartment at midnight, crying about how she couldn't sleep, knowing her daughters were estranged. The security system I had installed captured everything, including her admitting to the doorbell camera that she had made a mistake, but still thought I should share my success with Emma. The expansion into European markets that I launched that quarter was something I had been planning for 2 years, but the timing couldn't have been better. While my family was imploding, I was signing contracts with distributors in London, Berlin, and Paris. The press coverage was extensive, with TechCrunch writing a feature about our international growth. Emma had to watch her former classmates congratulate me on LinkedIn for something she had told them would be hers. Dad started visiting me secretly at my office, always during Mum's book club meetings. He looked older, worn down by the family war. "I'm proud of you," he would say. "Not just for protecting your company, but for becoming someone who could. Your mother is learning a hard lesson about respect. It might take time, but she's learning." We would drink coffee and talk about business the way we should have been able to do at family dinners. The dating world suddenly opened up for me once I stopped trying to meet my mother's impossible standards. Ryan Mitchell, no Ryan Anderson, was a software engineer at Microsoft who I met at a conference. He was brilliant, funny, and most importantly, came from a family that celebrated success, regardless of whether it came with a marriage certificate and babies. Our first date lasted 8 hours, talking about everything from machine learning to our favorite sci-fi novels. Marcus's business, a boutique investment firm that mostly invested his family's money in his friends' ventures, collapsed spectacularly when his family discovered the attempted theft. His reputation in Seattle's business community was destroyed. Emma had to take a job for the first time in her life, working retail at Nordstrom. The same friends she had looked down on for working saw her folding clothes in the department store. Mum's version of events kept evolving as she told it to different relatives. First it was a misunderstanding, then it was a joke that got out of hand. Finally she settled on claiming it was a test to see if I valued family or money more. The fact that she had literally tried to steal my money to give to family seemed to escape her logic entirely. The shift in family dynamics was tectonic. Suddenly, younger cousins were reaching out to me for advice about their startups and career paths. They had seen me stand up to the family matriarch and win. My cousin Derek, who was starting a biotech company, asked me to mentor him, specifically requesting that we keep it between us, because he didn't trust Mum's advice anymore. When Forbes ran a feature on female founders who had overcome family obstacles to build successful companies, my story was the centerpiece. The journalist had done her homework, interviewing former employees' clients, and even some family members. Emma tried to give her version, but it only made her look worse. The article went viral, bringing in a wave of new clients who appreciated a founder who could stand her ground. The philanthropy initiative I launched, the Rising Phoenix Scholarship for female entrepreneurs from difficult family situations, received over 1,000 applications in its first month. Reading their stories, I realized how common my experience was. Women whose families didn't understand or support their ambitions, who were expected to choose between success and acceptance. We funded 10 scholarships that first year. Sarah's promotion to Chief Operating Officer was celebrated with a party that was everything my family gatherings weren't: genuine, supportive, and focused on achievement rather than conformity. She gave a speech that night about how watching me handle the family situation had taught her about integrity and preparation. "You didn't just protect a company," she said. You protected all of us who depend on it. Emma's genuine apology came 6 months later after Marcus had filed for divorce, and she was facing reality for the first time. She admitted that Marcus had convinced her she deserved my company, that she had been jealous of my freedom and success, while she was trapped in a life that looked perfect but felt empty. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I tried to take from you, and I'm ashamed." Setting boundaries for any potential reconciliation was non-negotiable. I would consider rebuilding a relationship with Emma, but it would be on my terms. Respect for my choices. No discussions about marriage or children unless I brought them up. No requests for money. No bringing Marcus around ever. And Mum would need to acknowledge publicly what she had tried to do and apologise, not just to me, but to the entire family for her favouritism. 18 months have passed since that Sunday ambush, and my company is now valued at $10 million. We have offices in Seattle, London, and Singapore with over 100 employees worldwide. The algorithm I patented has become industry standard, licensed by 3 of our former competitors. But more than the business success, it's the personal growth that marks this chapter of my life. The therapy journey I embarked on helped me understand that my family's dysfunction wasn't my fault or my responsibility to fix. Dr. Martinez, my therapist, helped me recognize patterns that went back generations. My grandmother had favored my mother over Aunt Patricia the same way Mom favored Emma over me. It was a cycle of conditional love based on conformity rather than achievement or character. Mum's slow acceptance has been painful to watch but necessary. She attended our company's 5th anniversary party last month, standing quietly in the back as I gave a speech about building something from nothing. When I acknowledged her presence, thanking my parents for teaching me resilience, even if they didn't mean to, she cried. Afterward, she whispered, "I didn't understand. I thought success meant something else. I'm trying to understand now." Emma's growth has been genuine if difficult. After divorcing Marcus, she enrolled in community college to get her teaching degree. She's working as a substitute teacher, now making barely enough to cover her bills. But she told me last week that she's happier than she ever was in her perfect house with her perfect life. Her children are adjusting, learning that money doesn't equal happiness and that their mother is more than just Marcus's wife. Dad's private admission came during a fishing trip, just the 2 of us on Puget Sound. "Your mother was wrong," he said, watching the sunrise. "But she's my wife and I love her despite her flaws. You did what you had to do and I'm proud of you for it. Some days I wish I had your courage." We sat in comfortable silence after that, 2 people who understood that love and disappointment could exist in the same space. Building relationships with my nephews and niece on my own terms has been surprisingly rewarding. They come to the office sometimes and I show them how coding works, how businesses are built. 8-year-old James told his teacher he wants to be an entrepreneur like Aunt Haley, not a trust fund kid like his dad. Emma laughed when she heard a real laugh, not the bitter kind. Ryan proposed at our company celebration last quarter in front of my chosen family of colleagues and friends. He didn't ask my parents' permission or involve my mother in planning. He knew me well enough to understand that this moment was ours, not theirs. The ring was perfect, designed by a local artist, nothing like the ostentatious diamonds Emma had always said I should want. The realization that success isn't about proving worth to others came slowly but powerfully. I had spent so many years trying to show my mother that my path had value, that choosing career over early marriage and motherhood was valid. But her inability to see it was about her limitations, not my worth. My company's value was never dependent on her validation. Mum's tearful apology at Emma's daughter's birthday party was unexpected. She pulled me aside and said I didn't understand what you built because I couldn't see past my own dreams for you. I wanted you to have what I thought was important. I never asked what you wanted. I'm sorry for trying to steal your dreams to fund Emma's reality. The apology wasn't perfect, but it was real. Emma finding her own path has been perhaps the most surprising development. She's genuinely good at teaching patience with struggling students in a way she never was with anything else. She told me that failing at stealing my success forced her to find her own, and she's grateful for that, now even though the path was painful. The deeper truth I've learned is that family isn't about blood, but about respect. My team, especially Sarah, showed me more family loyalty than my blood relatives ever did. They celebrated my successes, supported me through challenges, and never once suggested I should be anything other than what I was. That's real family. The company culture we've built reflects these lessons. We support our employees' whole lives, not just their work output. We have generous parental leave for all genders, flexible working arrangements, and mental health support. We recognize that success looks different for everyone, and we celebrate all forms of achievement, not just the traditional ones. Speaking at conferences now, I share my story not as a victim, but as a warrior who was prepared for battle. The young women who approach me afterward, tears in their eyes telling me about their own family struggles, remind me why this story matters. We're told that family is everything, but sometimes family is the obstacle we need to overcome to become everything we're meant to be. The final reflection on that smile, the one that confused everyone in my parents' living room that Sunday, brings me peace. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about being prepared, about knowing that someone who truly loves you doesn't try to take what you've built. They celebrate it, protect it, stand guard over it while you rest. I smiled because I knew I had already won by seeing them clearly and protecting myself accordingly. My message to anyone watching who has faced similar betrayal is this: your worth isn't determined by others' inability to see it. Your achievements are valid even if your family doesn't understand them. Your chosen path has value even if it doesn't match their expectations. Success is the best response to those who doubt you, but wisdom is knowing when to walk away from people who would rather steal your light than kindle their own. As I look at my life now with my company thriving, my relationship with Ryan built on mutual respect, and my family relationships rebuilt on proper boundaries, I realized that losing my family's approval was the price of finding myself. And that smile, it was the beginning of my freedom. To those of you who've watched this entire story unfold, I want to ask you, have you ever had to choose between family approval and your own dreams? How did you protect what you built from those who felt entitled to it? Share your stories in the comments below, because I know I'm not alone in this experience. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more about turning life's betrayals into business victories. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to protect themselves from family who would dim their light. Thank you for being part of my journey, and remember, sometimes the best family is the one you choose, not the one you're born into. Keep building your dreams, even if you have to build walls to protect them first.